We finished the installation of the field level and data security for the first tables in the technical installing. Going to take a look at the application, and I have a little strange setup in here for showing this one. I actually have a Kronos company using as my easy security, so it means I actually have customers and so on. At the end, I will show how you really would use this one, but this one is a little simplified setup. So as I finished my install, I had all these read-only codes created. We have some extra ones in here in the demo database in here that I'm using right now for basic in here. We also created a data security code, but you normally would not have any of those ones after finishing the installing. But let's look at the field level functionality first, and I'm going to show that in the sales order and credit memo and so on inside NAV. If I look at it right now, under sales orders, I'll see that everything looks as normal. All the actions are in there. If I look at a single sales order, all the fields are editable. I can click on every action up here as I want to. Yeah. Same thing would go for the credit memo. And one of the things about credit memos and sales orders, underneath is actually the same table. So it's one of those things where it's really hard to control with the standard NAV security if you want to allow people to see credit memos, but you only want them to allow or modify orders and quotes, for example. But in this case, it all looks completely normal. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply some field level security for this one. So I'll go into the user security setup. And we looked at roles and logins earlier. A user security setup is not connected to roles and logins. So you can actually have a super user in NAV, and with the user security setup, you can actually control their access to field level actions and data security. So I'm going to create a new record, and I'm going to leave the user ID blank in here. When I leave the user ID blank, it basically applies to every user that is not mentioned later on in the list in there. So that actually means as I create this record, it defaults to my read-only, and that's because this check mark out here under this is actually set to be the default one out here. It automatically selects that one. If I now go back to my sales order, I'll see that it looks quite different right now. All my actions grayed out. If I look at a single sales order, all the actions are grayed out. Every field is grayed out in here. I can't change anything any longer. It basically is now read-only in here for me. Same thing, of course, goes for credit memos, sales quotes, and so on. I wanted to have some access. I don't want to take all my access away in here. So I actually go in and select when I'm logged in with user down here in table 36. Instead of the read-only, I want to do the basic setup in here. The basic setup allow me some access in here. So if I now go back, look at the sales order, it didn't change anything on my list really, but as I get into a single order, I can see my sell to customer number is editable, my ship to is editable down here, and in my actions up here, I can now click on statistics up here. It's also possible for me to actually go create a new sales order, but of course I only have access to these few fields in here, so I can't really put a lot more information in. I can't change the salesperson, the payment terms, or anything like that one in here. But I can still create a sales order in here. I could do the same for the lines. Right now I'm only dealing with the sales header table and not the sales line table in here. So that's what the field level security allow me in here in the sales order. And if I look at credit memos, it's still completely read-only in here. I can't change anything. I can't click on any actions or anything like that up here. So let's take a look at that basic code, what that actually means in here. Basic is specifying 3 objects in the system actually in here. And you can have as many objects as you want. the way it's designed in here is basically you page 0 being the default, and I have made the default page be view in here. I can also hide pages in here. So as I showed the sales order statistics, maybe I don't want users to actually see that. So I can actually go in here and hide my sales order statistics in here. This one is for the whole page in general. On my sales order, I have actually specified fields and controls in here. So if we take a look at the sales order and look at the details, again, field 0 is the default, and currently it's set for view in here. I can actually go hide every field in here also if I want. Then I can say, now I only want people to view my sell to customer number. They can change the ship to if they want down here. As I go down, I'll see my controls are all the actions up in the top, like these ones up here. Some of them are the technical ones, but in general, most of them are from standard NAV. And again, I have edit, view, and hide, and I can just go hide all those ones. I can leave those ones in there, it's fine. I'll go add another one, like my post and print button. But I'm actually going to gray out that button so people can't click on it. They can just see there is a post and print action in there. So I made a few changes. I hide some fields. I hide a page in here. And it will actually have quite a lot of impact for how it looks for the user now. If I open up my sales order, I can see now most of the fields are now gone. If I show more fields, there is no more fields to show because only the sell to customer number is available. On my shipping tab, I have the fields down here that I was allowed to edit. My foreign trades and so on, they are all empty because there's no fields left on them in here. One important thing to notice in here that sometimes there's values shown on pages that not necessarily are fields, and we control the fields being shown but not these values. There is a way of manually customizing the code slightly so you can actually make that hide also. My actions are also reduced to very few up here, and as I click on statistics, I just get an error that I'm not allowed to see it. And I'm a super user in the system, so it's not a roles and logins error, it's just from the field level security in here. These other actions that are in here are all related to the technical side of NAV, and you can't really get rid of those ones. They will always be on all pages in the system in here. So that's the field level security. It allows me to control each individual page and for each page do it differently in here. I want to create a new setup in here because right now in my list of customers in here, on my customer card, a user can modify everything in here. I want to make a special customer card where people can only modify the address information, and they would actually only be able to use the ship to addresses and the comment button in here, and not rest of the other things in here. So let's go back here to my field level and data security. And I go to field level security codes, and I'll create a new one. A field level security code is always for a table, and only the table that are used during the initial setup is possible to select. And you need to have code added in the application for pages and forms in the classic environment to actually do this one in here. I can see for my customer, we actually have 18 pages in here. And I'm going to call this one address only. And it asks if you want to copy permissions from the default. And the default is a check mark you can have on one of them. And it's by default, the read only is set to that one. So it basically just gives me a very restricted setup in here. And then I can start opening up with the pages that are different in here. So I wanted to make my customer card different. So I'll select my page customer card. In general, I want to leave the page editable because then I can control the fields after that one. So if I go in here and say, okay, let's look at the details, For the field 0, my default would be that I actually hide every field in here. Then I want to add the fields that should be different. And I want the name 2, address, and I will then go down and also get the postcode and the county down here, and that's 91 and 92 in here. I also, so that's my fields in here, and I hide every field. I don't want people to really change the number and the name in here. I would just only allow them to change the address and hide everything else in here. For the actions on the page, it's all the menu items. It's controls in here. And again, by default, I want to hide all of them. Then I want to go down and say, I want to put my ship to addresses. I want people to edit that one. And I also want to have them have access to my comments in here. And that's only 2 buttons. I actually want everything else should be hidden for buttons in here. So I created a new exception from the default rule where it just makes everything read-only in here. And it's a very simplified customer card by hiding all the details in the standard NAV in here. I want to apply that to my user, and I don't want to apply it to everybody. I would just go apply it only to myself in here. For table 18, and I don't want the read-only. I want the address only in here. So if I now go back, look at my customer, I'll see I didn't do anything on the list except I made everything read-only up here. And then as I go to the customer card, I have very few fields left in here. On my foreign trades, I have nothing. In shipping, there is one field, and that's one of those ones where it's not really a field, it's actually a function showing a value in here. Payments, invoicing, all of them are blank in here. If I go look under navigate, I'll see my ship to and my comments in here. And that's the only 2 actions I can actually click on in here, and I'll be able to create new and so on in here. So that's a very simple way of actually doing this one. And the way I did it here, I didn't do a default, but I only created one directly for my user in here. Another thing we can do with field level and data security is a data security side of it in here. So if I now go look at my posting groups in here, I'll just add it to my list in here. I can see I have customers for different posting groups in here, domestic, foreign, EU, and so on. If this user only needs to see the one in the domestic posting group, that's a setup I have actually created in here. So we can go take a look at it and say I have a data security code. The concept is exactly the same for each table. You can have multiple data security codes, and you can specify each object being different out here. So page 0 is my default, and I specified 2 fields out here. I have my customer posting group. I have a hidden filter, one the user can't see and they can't remove in here for the blank or domestic. It's important to include the blank, by the way, if a user can create a record, because it also will create a record and it will disappear right away and so on. You can also have editable filters like this one. It's a filter for the blue location, and the blank one in here, it's more kind of a helpful one. It helps the user see the right record. It could also be that I maybe only want to see the one that are not blocked, for example. If I look at my customer list in here, I only have for the customer list the hidden filter in here. But we can do several things in here and say maybe in the list we don't actually want to see people, let people see all the customers that are blocked, because in that way it should actually be only showing the one that are for a single or the unblocked one when they look up from the sales order, for example. So I can add a blocked one, and this one is an option field. And I could actually go out here and say, I want to make it editable, and I want to make it so I actually can only look at the one that are blocked, for example. It's not a very good idea to use these values as text, because if you use multiple languages, these option fields are going to be different. So an important part is just use the integer value for it. In this case, blocked, not being blocked, is 0 in here. You can use the same for Boolean ones, where 0 and 1 can actually be used for the value of the filter. Another thing you maybe would like to filter on is a current work year, for example, or the year or the user ID and things like that one. Those kind of things are not that easy to put a fixed filter on, because if the filter needs to change every year, it's not very interesting. If you have one by user ID, you have to have a lot of these data security codes to actually do this one. And that's why we can actually substitute values into a filter. And if it's an expensive filter to calculate, like it's using a lot of records to read that one, and it never changes during the day anyway, you can calculate it once, but in general, you normally want to calculate the value all the time. You now have an assist edit out here that we can look at what is called dynamic filters in here. We can look at the work year, the year, work months, work or now, and things like that one. We can also look at the user ID as a filter, and there are several fields on the user setup that actually can be used for filtering also in here. And so you can select those ones also. All this one is based on a return value from a code unit, and it basically allows you to add more in there, and I will show that a little later in here. But I'll go here and say the work year. It put it in percentage sign, so it's a variable. It needs to be calculated before it actually gets applied in here. But it also allowed me to do additional filtering if I wanted to in here. So I could say the work year or the 1st of January 2014 in here. I'm going to delete the last part here, so only have the work year. So I have these additional filters in here. Let's go apply that one to the user in here. And again, this one is done in the user setup also in here. So I'm going to take away my field level security code for address only, and I'm going to apply my domestic data security in here. So you have to select it. So I now applied that data security in here, and if I go look at my list of customers now, first of all, I can see up here that I have a filter for where blocked is the blank value up here, blocked for shipping invoice. So only see the one that are not blocked now. And I also have a date filter in here, but I can't see my filter for my domestic posting group in here. But I still only see those domestic customers in here. And that's because that filter was hidden and the user can't really see it, and they can't get rid of it, as I just got rid of the other filters in here. It still didn't should give me more records to see in here. On the customer, on the default page in here, I actually added a filter for my blue location or blank location in here. So if I open one of these ones like customer 10,000, it shows me the record. If I try to open this one that is for a different location in here, it falls outside the filter, it basically tells me that that record is not available, and it finds the first record that is actually for my domestic and for my blue location down here that falls within my filter. So you can have different records showing in the cards as you have in the list. So you can see all the customers maybe in the list, but only the customers you're the salesperson for is the one that you're allowed to edit on the customer card, for example. So that's a very powerful feature. If you noticed it here, that customer actually disappeared, and that's because it's reusing the data from the SQL server. If I just refresh, that customer shows up back on again. So this one is basically how the data security and field level security actually works in NAV. You define these field level and data security codes, then you use the user security setup to actually assign it to users in here. And you do it by table, and you can only have one setup by each table, so it makes it a lot simpler to get an overview. And by using the default, the blank one, you can really have a much simpler setup that way. If you have many users in the system, you typically don't want to have a user security setup for each of them in here. But you can actually use the group members that are in here. I can go in and say, yeah, I have already created a setup for the user down here. But I actually want to have John, and I also want to have Susan being the same as this user down here. So as I create this group now, if John logs into NAV and tries to open up my list of customers now, there's not a user security setup for John, but there is one for user. And since John is using that one, it would actually use that one. If there wasn't anyone that John was not part of any group, it would actually fall back to the blank user ID in here that is the lowest level. So basically there's 3 levels. John can be in here by himself, and if we make a record for it in here, we can actually go in and select John for table 36, and we can say we just want him to have full permissions, and that's actually different from what the user has down here. And in general, it will fall back to read only in here. So in that way, you can have 3 levels of security in here. There is a function up here to show user statistics in here. So if I actually click on this user statistics, it will calculate the active security for John everywhere. And since we made John blank in here, there is a user security setup for him, but he don't have any field level security. For the customer, there is one by the group in here, and it's using the domestic one in here. This function can also calculate all users, so it's a good way of verifying this one. So I can see in here Susan was using the same as user for 2 of them in here, but a lot of them was not having anyone in here. And if I make this one a little bigger, I can see down here that Simon actually was using it by the default in here. So basically, you can see the setup for every user with this function in here in the system that way. Those 2 up here. Everything I have done so far have been inside this company in here. And I really have multiple companies in my database in here. And for the roles and logins, you do a publish function. For the field level and data security, we have an ability to copy data between companies, but only maintain it once in here. And let's go to my other company in here, or one of them in here, being the Kronos North America down here. If I go to the field level and data security setup in here, I can go down to set up the data to be copied. First of all, it created some lookup data in here. That's basically data that is being used, like the actions on the pages and so on. It's being inserted into this company. The main reason for having all this data by company is that you have users that maybe only have access to one company. They can't really read data from the EC Security company, so they need to have the data over here. So we want to select the company where we ran the install in and where we have all the data by default, and then we can decide which parts to actually copy in here. And by default, it copied field level security setups and data security setups. If you have multiple companies, you typically don't want to copy the user setup because each company probably have a different setup by user. Same goes for the group members, as I showed you earlier. So as I do this one, if I look at field level security right now, there's nothing in here. If I go back and look at my function to copy data, it will copy the 10 field level security code and the data security codes into this company now. And I can see all of them in here, my new address only, my basic and things like that one in here. These one are all marked that they're coming from the setup company. So if I actually wanted to delete them or change any of them in here, it would actually give me an error that I couldn't do that because it's maintained from a different company in here. Yeah, so that's a copy functionality, and I right now only set up one company in here, like the North America company. Let me set up the Euro company also in here. And I will select my company that I'm copying from. That's my Easy Security company. And I want to check the copy setup down here. And then I will run this function to copy data. And again, I'm using it from a lower level company in here, so I'm only copying my data down to this company in here. If I actually wanted to push to all the companies at the same time, I would actually do this one from the Easy Security company, and then it will push the data to all the companies. But the idea is here that if you're doing it from a child company, you would only do it for your own company. If you do it from Easy Security company, you push it everywhere in there. And I only set it up to copy the field level and data security codes in here. Just because you copy, it don't mean you can't create one locally in here. So let's go back to the Coronis North America in here. And I'm going to make a very simple sales line setup in here, basically removing almost every field in there. So I'll go create a new field level security code. It should be for my sales line table. And it asks if I want to copy from default, and it's typically always a good idea because it's creates that default page where it makes everything read-only for me. Then I can go down and select my sales line, and it's a little tricky with the naming in here in the RTC because they're all called the same, but you can find them the actual page number in the design in here. I want to leave the page editable, but then I want to go and change the individual fields in here. And again, each field, I just actually want to hide them. And then I want to add the fields that are going to be used by the user. So they can use type field. And the number field was number 6. They can see the description, and they should actually also be able to see the location. And I want them to see the quantity and the unit of measure code in here. That's the unit of measure code. And I want to leave those ones, the description. I only want people to see that, the same or the location, but they should be able to change the rest of it in here. So if I now go apply that one to my users, now I actually just apply it to myself in here. Since I didn't copy the user setup, it's all blank. I'll go in and say, okay, I want for the user in table 37. I don't want my read-only in here. I want my basic access now. So if I now go take a look at my sales orders, and I look at a single line, type, number, description, location, quantity, unit of measure, and that's it. There's no more fields in here. If I look at the description field, it's non-editable. If I look at the quantity, I can change it, or I can change the unit of measure out here. But I can only see certain of these fields actually in here and not change them. So that's a good way of testing it. I tested it in a company, Now I actually want to distribute this new field level security code that I created in here to my other companies. I just created it in here so I could actually test that it worked fine. To do that, I need to get it back to Easy Security. So let's switch the company in here. So my Easy Security company. And I will go to my field level security code. And right now it don't exist in here, but I can copy from a company in here. And I want to copy from my North America. I can see I have one unique field level security code in there. I want to select my basic access, and by looking at these from setup company, I would actually be able to select that code in here. So now it inserted my new basic access, and in the other company, by the way, since I'm copying it to the setup company in here, it will actually mark it now as being copied. So if I go back, use the function to copy data between companies, I'll see in my Europe company, I had one new one and 10 updated, and I didn't have any data security changes. In my other company, I had 11 updated because I actually ended up copying that one. So that's basically how the functionality is allowing you to create a code locally, copy them back to the setup company, and then distribute it to all the companies after that one by using that copy function. I mentioned a while back that for data security, we can do these dynamic filters in here. And dynamic filters are actually using a code unit to calculate it in here. So if I go in here, it's a code unit inside the Easy Security range. So when I look at it right now, I need to get a license that can look at this. And I can see it's basically just calling that function, and it will go down here and return a value depending on that one in here. Like, for example, my allowed posting range would be either in the user setup or in the GL setup and so on. This code unit should really not be changed because it's part of the standard Easy Security, but we have a code unit in here that is intended to be customized. It could actually also be copied to a whole different range, for example, in here. So if I design this one, I can actually go in here and say I want to view my properties and I want to put it in as code unit 50,000. And I'll just call it my dynamic filters code unit in here. And then we have some template company code in here that can calculate my time. And there's two functions in here. One is, of course, to calculate it, but another function is to actually insert the filters in here. So I'm now saving this one as a new code unit, and I'm adding this new function in here that is called my time in here. So I can see up here I have my new code unit up here. If I go back to the router client, I would be able to go to my dynamic filters and add them from this code unit in here. And I can say insert the standard one, or I can insert filters from a code unit. And I'll go down and find my 50,000 in here. And that's my dynamic filter customized. And as I select that one, it will run the insert function. And it can see now has my time in here. And it knows that that code unit is going to be, or that's a code unit number that know how to calculate that one. So you can add all these ones. You can change the code unit if you have the right rights, or a partner can change it for you to actually add all these functions that are matching your dimensions inside NAV at that time. So that's how the dynamic filters are working in here. One thing I said was that we can have field level security working for super users, but super users, of course, can go in and change this data in here. We have a way of protecting the data inside easy security, even for super users. And it's actually called login setup in here. And if I go down here, I can see for user ID, I can go in and say my own user that I'm working as in here. I want to have access to edit all the setup in field level and data security. And I could add other users in here, like John, for example. I want John to edit user security setups, but not any of the other things in here, including the standard setup in here. And again, this one is created by company. Right now, I don't give myself access to edit anything in here, but I have not activated the feature yet. So the last thing I have to do is to go put the check mark in, and now it's using the login setup to verify that I'm allowed to change it in here. So if I go in here to say, no, I don't really want to have this limitation for myself in here, I want to go into edit this one and actually just change it in here. But as I try to change that one, it just tells me you don't have the edit user security setup in the login setup for this user. So in that way, you can use the login setup to protect data inside easy security, and in that way protect it against super users that normally would be able to change it in here. So it's not 100% bulletproof if people can go to SQL and many other places, but most users would not be able to go there. So, but that's basically the field level and data security module that is part of easy security in here.